all very welcome here this afternoon for the annual Quality Customer Service Network Conference, back in person for the first time since 2019. So it's wonderful to be here in these beautiful surrounds this afternoon. And also those who are joining us online, you're all very welcome as well. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Margaret O'Connor and I am from Revenue, and I'm stepping in for Breen Boyle, the chairman, today. I was really surprised and amazed and impressed to hear that the network is 22 years in existence this year. That's quite an achievement for a network that's largely driven by people within disparate and separate organisations. So I think that's a wonderful achievement in itself. So let's start the morning by congratulating those involved and yourselves for being involved in it. And I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to welcome so many colleagues from across the public service. We've capacity attendance here in Farmleigh, and we also have many delegates joining us online. Latest numbers, I believe, over 250 people with representation from across the public service. And our membership continues to grow. And in fact, we have new members since we last met in September. So I would just like to say a special welcome to representatives from the Department of Health, the Department of Social Protection, Longford County Council, the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, the Local Government Management Agency, the National Transport Authority, the Citizens Information Board, Department of Education, Louth County Council and the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, along with our colleagues from the 160 organisations that are involved with the Quality Customer Service Network. So a central part of the network's work programme is to promote and implement the Quality Customer Service Initiative, which sets out 12 guiding principles for best practice in customer service, which we'll all be very familiar with through the work of the network. And you'll be pleased to know that there's a short exam on those principles in a few minutes. Kidding. So I'm really excited to hear examples of how those principles are being operated in organisations from our colleagues today. Before we get started, it is my job to do some housekeeping notes for you. So first of all, you'll have noticed that there's a photographer and videographer here today, and they're going to be circulating around trying to capture the atmosphere of the day. If that's something that you don't welcome and you don't consent to having your picture taken, that's absolutely fine. If you just say to them, just let them know, just say no, and that's absolutely fine. But other than that, we'd love to see your smiling faces. The second thing to mention is that we really do value your engagement, both online and in person here today. You have an opportunity for questions after each speaker, and we want people to join the conversation. So we're going to have roving mics here in the room in Farmleigh for any of us who want to go old school, but there's also an option if you wish to go online. We're using Slido. So for those of you online, you'll see QR code in the corner of your screen. You'll also can go to slido.com, and if you put in 1556153, that will bring you to our conference. The details are on your conference handouts there, and as I said, you'll see it on the slides. We also, as I mentioned, have a roving mic if you want to ask in person. The one thing I'd ask is please get involved. So we're now going to move to the main event, and I want to hand you over to our MC for the day, Eoin Tunstead.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. As I'm sure you look at your programmes and look at me, you think Breen Boyle looks a bit different. So regrettably Breen can't join us today, but he does send on his best wishes to everyone here today and to the QCSN. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Eoin Tunstead. I work in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform with the Public Service Transformation team. And it's just to say how great it is to be back in person here. I think after 2 long years of doing online conferences, I think there's been a bit of fatigue, and I think there's certainly been a bit of a will and kind of a want to get back in person and see each other again. So it's fantastic to be back home where the QCSN is this has been its home for its conferences over the last number of years, so it's wonderful to be back in person with you all here today. Before we just get to the main event, I just want to say that we have a little bit of a small addition towards the end, in addition to the change up between myself and Margaret. So after every speaker, we will have time for Q&A. Again, just to reiterate that we want as much participation as possible. So again, we have, if you're in person would like to speak, we're happy to get a microphone to you. Or if you're at home, or if you're a little bit shy and you still want your question asked, Slido 1556153. Yes, you will hear me say that number over and over again, and it's not bingo today at the conference. So please do get involved. And at the end, we're going to have a final panel discussion with most of our panelists here today, our presenters, which will be facilitated by our Assistant Secretary, Marianne Cassidy. So now let's move on to the main event. I know also Minister McGrath had planned to join us today, but unfortunately he's been called out on urgent Dáil business. And of course he sends his apologies, and I just want to say to appreciate his commitment that he's shown to the QCSI kind of over the last number of months, particularly to offer the work that we do. But however, we are delighted to welcome Marianne Cassidy to provide the opening to the address. Marianne is the Assistant Secretary with responsibility for public service transformation at the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. I won't keep her waiting any longer. She's eager to get up here. So Marianne, when you're ready.
Thanks, Eoin, and thanks, Margaret. Look, I'm really delighted to be here at the annual conference. It's the highlight of the year in terms of the quality customer service network. And as both Margaret and Eoin have said, it's been a long 3 years coming in terms of getting together, getting to meet together, connect with one another. And for those of you online, we hope to see you and the next time, but it also shows the opportunity that the new normal has offered in terms of hybrid working. So it's great to be here today. The last 2 years in terms of customer service have been empowering, engaging is one way to put it. It's been definitely a challenge in terms of maintaining across all the organization, the level of services that we have provided to our customers. And as I said to the network group this morning, the work around the principle, around the guidance, around the charter has been definitely something that has been a bit of a backbone and a North Star when you're trying to continue those services, to have something to hang on, and also a network of people you can reach out. And I see my ex-colleague of the court service here coming in force, and definitely for the courts it was a very important work that was done through this network. So thank you to all of you for your contribution in that. Today we'll hear about some of the many public service initiatives which are helping to deliver this kind of excellent customer service. It's an opportunity to showcase them, celebrate them, and also, you know, for to scale them if there are things, because that kind of learning experience is very important. We have a huge range of diversity in terms of the organization we make our public service, and a range of needs we serve in our communities. However, across all these high range of activities, we all have a common purpose, which is to serve the people of Ireland. And whatever the changing context of service delivery, we all want to build and deliver trusted, responsive, accessible, and user-centered services. And today we'll hear from speakers on their own take how they went about this. And as I said, the network support is very important. So first, we're going to hear from Dustin Brown in the US, who is going to share his extensive experience of helping lead government-wide effort to improve customer experience, focusing on the link between employee engagement and quality customer service. Dustin is the chair of the Public Governance Committee of the OECD as well, and has been hugely generous from a transformation perspective to look at the item of trust. What are the key drivers of trust in public service in terms of openness, reliability, integrity, and how can we all work to kind of shift the dial on those? Then we'll hear 3 fantastic examples of initiative here in Ireland, which are about empowering, enabling, and engaging our team to deliver service excellence excellence. We'll hear about learning and development at the court service, innovation at the HSE, and design practice at Cork County Council. All those initiatives demonstrate there's a lot of way to engage and empower our team, but all with that one common purpose: to better serve the people of Ireland. I mentioned Julian will speak about design practices. She's joining us online. We're still in a pandemic, as you get a few of us here. In fact, the design approach is something that's very close to my heart in terms of transformation, because we need to engaging and empowering your people to deliver service excellence. That's something that will run through all the presentation today. And those of you that have used that kind of design approach will see how much of an empowering tool it is for our own staff. Those at the centre to feedback on how the service actually land with the customer and give them a way to feedback and shape those services right up to the centre. As you all know, you may know, hopefully you know, we published our first prototype design principle last October. There was a work with members here who greatly we did that work in terms of putting it all together. And we are going to work on an action plan on how to embed those principles. And all of your department, the department of your ages, will have an opportunity to participate, and we really look forward to your ideas. And today's, as Eoin and Margaret have said, it's important that we hear those ideas early. So the network was set up to support our public service, 25 years going, that's amazing. And the initiative was seen as such value that a few weeks ago, the minister had said we should give it more visibility, make sure that it's embedded, and then also give it a refresh, because when they were developed 25 years ago, it was in a very different environment in terms of the lack of digital capacity. So how can we actualize them for that? So the group has been working on that kind of refresh. The 12 guiding principles are still there, and we've done a bit of work to see how they translate in today's world. In the next few weeks, that kind of refresh principle will be launched by our ministers. The government has recently agreed in the memo that it is government policy. And then after that, we're going to use them and embed them throughout the public service through a number of tools, and you'll hear more during the day. In terms of the redeveloping and updating the charters and the action plan. We're also going to use that kind of design approach to look at how we develop digital services, and those 12 principles of customer services will inform that in terms of live event. And I know some of you are going to be involved in that. So there's a really busy time ahead in terms of the network, and I hope that you find a lot of information out of today, and then that you will find a new enthusiasm to participate and push all those transformation initiatives. And again, I just want to thank you for all the work you've done in the last few years to get those principles at the center of government policy. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Marianne. I think we can all agree that it's so wonderful to hear that the QCS initiative and its principles being reaffirmed by government. There's no doubt that our QCSM members will be central to kind of how we proceed with that, and to strengthen the initiative and their ideas will be central to how we kind of progress and go forward with it. So now we are going to be moving on to the main portion of today's conference. We've been moving on to our presentation. So as you heard from Marianne, And we've some really interesting speakers kind of from different approaches to how we kind of engage, empower and kind of support our employees. L&D, innovation and service design. So our theme is engaged, empowered, responsive, enabling our teams to deliver service excellence. So I think undoubtedly this team really builds on the topics that we've kind of seen during the year during the networks. And we've heard about great initiatives across public service to engage with customers and to take on action in terms of accessibility, engaging with harnessing customer feedback for better service delivery, and building on trust, importantly, with our customers, which is very central to what we do. Now, I think today is more so the theme about today is taking a step back and realizing, okay, how can we deliver this? And how do we engage and empower the people who actually do this on the ground and deliver service excellence, most importantly, to the people that we serve? So, just before I introduce our first speaker, I'm just going to politely ask all our speakers if we can try our best to keep to the allotted time, so we can stay on track. I might be guilty of that myself too. And again, just to reiterate, please submit questions, and there will be time after each speaker to engage with us. So again, on Slido, code 1556153, during or after the presentation time, I will be looking at questions on my phone here, so I'll be happy to relay them to any of the presenters during the day. So we're going to move into our first session, which is themed on engaging and empowering our teams to deliver service excellence. Our first speaker, internationally, he is going to dial in international from Washington. And we have Dustin Brown from the Office of Management, need to get this right, and Budgeting at the Executive Office of the United States President. Dustin is Deputy Director for Management at the OMB and is also Chair of the OECD Public Governance Committee. So we're really, really delighted to welcome Dustin today. So he's going to be joining us remotely to share his extensive experience of helping lead government-wide efforts to improve customer service. So Dustin's going to focus a little bit on the links between employee experience and engagement on the one side and the importance of quality customer service and trust in governments on the other. So if AV are good, perfect, we are going to go live to Washington. And Dustin should be joining us. Dustin, you're very welcome. Take it away.
Good to be with everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, and wonderful to be with you virtually. Hopefully sometime we can make that in person. I really appreciate the partnership with my colleagues from Ireland. Marianne, it was great to see you again virtually. We were able to connect in Luxembourg, and also want to acknowledge Grace O'Regan, who I worked with in OECD as one of the members of the Bureau that really helped set the strategic direction for a lot of our OECD public governance work, and Nora as well for reaching out and inviting me. So really appreciate the partnership, and look forward to more opportunities to collaborate and learn from each other on this journey. I thought I'd share a little bit of background on where we've been, kind of where we are, and then a little bit on where we're going with our efforts around improving customer experience for the public in the United States. We start a lot of these conversations increasingly with a question around trust and trust in government, institutions in particular. And I will say this is not just happening within the United States, but as I mentioned in the OECD public governance work, we have also set improving trust as essentially our true north of many of the different government reform efforts we have undertaken. Ultimately, a great measure of how successful those wind up being is whether they are impacting people's trust in our government institutions. So that is a theme that is, I think, emerging internationally, but also domestically. And we definitely have a ways to go within the United States. The recent survey showed only 20% of adults reporting that they trust government most of the time, or just about always. And key gaps between, the role that we're playing and how good of a job we are doing. And those are areas we are looking into to better understand some of the key drivers of people's trust in government. We also know that we are behind where the private sector is in terms of people's satisfaction and with service delivery. We're on average about 10.7 points behind the private sector, and many of our agencies are kind of in the bottom of many of the measures and indices that the are used to measure people's trust and experience with services. Why is this important? Well, one of the things that we have seen from a McKinsey research study that looked at different governments across the world is there is a relationship between people's trust in government and their experience with service delivery. In fact, they suggested 67% of people's trust in government can be explained by their experience with services. So this is, I think, a really important place to start the conversation and the focus. And while many things driving people's trust in government, I think it's fair to say, are beyond our control, this is one that is within our control by and large. And we know we have a ways to go. And in making those service delivery experiences more like people experience in their private lives, and move that as a goal. I will note that the recent efforts of the current administration really have been able to build on a foundation that really started actually a few administrations ago. I've actually been in my role across 4 administrations since the Bush administration, and the Clinton administration prioritized customer service delivery. And each administration has had some initiative. I think one of the challenges we found is those initiatives can vary pretty significantly from one administration to the other. So we really have worked over the last 3 administrations to have a more standard way of looking at this that can be continued from one administration to the other. One of the ways we have done that is embed a lot of the focus on actions that agencies need to take within our guidance to agencies around management and budget priorities that they need to take. And that has been very successful in helping integrate this into the routines of government, which ultimately, have a better likelihood at driving culture of government. So that is something that really has been, able to provide us more continuity across the last 10 years, so that the relationship between the Office of Management and Budget, who sets the government-wide guidelines, and our ministries, has been more consistent in terms of areas of focus and attention and how we're measuring and monitoring progress, which I think has been quite helpful. We've asked each of our agencies to look at 2 services, conduct an annual self-assessment. We even have standard 6 measures that all of our high-impact service providers, those are the providers that have the highest interactions with the public, must incorporate into their feedback mechanisms and then develop action plans. And all of this is public on our performance.gov/CX website to make sure that we're being transparent about the progress being made and where we're falling short. As this administration came into office, right from the very first joint address to Congress, you see this quote from the president talking about how the linkage between this work and democracy. We have to prove democracy still works and that our government still works and can deliver for our people. We leverage that focus to really set this as our goal as part of the president's management agenda, looking at simple, seamless, and secure customer experience that's on par with top consumer experiences. As I mentioned, the president's management agenda, released about a year ago, just established only 3 priorities. The first was around the federal workforce and strengthening and empowering our workforce. And the second was this, around customer experience, and importantly, built on efforts that had been undertaken over the previous administration and really lifted them up to an even higher level, kind of looking at individual commitments that we could hold our agencies accountable for, as well as looking at not just those experiences within one of our agencies, but beginning to set up a process for looking at life experiences that cut across agencies. And I know Ireland is looking at that as well. And then third, looking at platforms for shared service delivery that we can be providing to our agencies, that where it's more efficient and effective for us to provide a common platform. So for instance, our survey capabilities, we offer a platform that all agencies can use to get better information from the customers we serve rather than each individual agency having to procure that capability on their own. In addition to the President's management agenda, there was also a specific executive order that was signed by the President on customer experience that was even more specific about individual commitments. So for instance, being able to renew your passport online. And we had about 35 of those commitments that were identified within the executive order that was signed almost a year ago. Here's a picture of the President signing it with members of cabinet. And again, the executive order identified specific agency actions, but also some government-wide actions, including putting the agency I work for, Office of Management and Budget, really as the ultimate kind of responsible entity for resolving issues, especially that require multiple agencies working together. And that includes things like interagency data sharing. As you get into some of the specifics of what it takes to optimize service delivery, you realize things like data sharing, it can be quite important, and who's actually responsible for resolving those issues has been something we're trying to work to resolve. You can see we have kind of ongoing accountability mechanisms and then additional actions that we're taking, including integrating customer experience into strategic planning, annual performance planning, and even our own individual senior executive service performance plans. As I mentioned, we have 35 individual high impact service providers within our federal government, and each of those has an action plan and is regularly updating progress about every 6 months on our centralized website. Again, this is something that has been in place for 3 administrations and provides us kind of a common language and framework for talking about it. And the number of people who experience some interaction with these agencies is in the millions in many cases, whether that's going through a TSA airport or getting your healthcare from a veterans hospital. I also mentioned the work we're doing on life experiences. We're right in the middle of that work. We used our President's Management Council, which is comprised of our deputy ministers of each of the agencies, to select the 5 life experiences that we wanted to focus on. And you can see those here. Those include recovering from a disaster, birth and early childhood, so 0 to 5 years, facing a financial shock, preparing for separation or approaching retirement. And those are, require engagement from multiple agencies to work together. We have just completed the first phase of that, which include the designation, and then the second around a discovery. And we have now moved into selecting specific projects that we will focus on, and we do have some funding that is available to help stand up some teams and capabilities who really can be responsible. One of the things we talk about often in OMB and also in the OECD Public Governance Committee is that our countries face horizontal problems, yet we have vertical organizations. And I look at the efforts like we're taking here around life experiences as how do we really develop people and capabilities whose full-time job it is to focus on, resolving that fundamental dynamic. So we're very excited about the opportunities here. And I am very excited about the opportunities to learn from other countries. I know many countries are engaging in this work. And I think we'll have an opportunity to learn from each other going forward through OECD or other networks. We just actually a few weeks ago kind of presented the results of the human-centered design interviews that we did with individuals who had gone through each of these life experiences, whether that was somebody retiring, somebody who had just been affected by a disaster. This is our old executive office building where OMB and other executive office of the president agencies are. And we, actually had, these different displays out, and we had the people who led these discovery sprints out and available to talk with people coming by so that we could show them the journey maps of people who have to navigate through government systems. And it was just a great kind of physical display that helped bring to life this work, not just in a thick report, but something people could really interact with. And so that was a real successful kind of moment for the team to be able to highlight the work they've done. I also wanted to just briefly touch on the work we're doing to look at the connection between the customer experience and the employee experience. So not only do we see relationships with trust and customer experience, but we obviously see relationships between employee engagement of our own workforce and customer experience. And so we've begun to look at some pilots of where we can learn from case studies in some of our agencies that have, for instance, large numbers of field offices and employees dispersed across the country, to better understand and examine this relationship. So I'll just walk through two case studies we did with kind of similar analysis and some of the findings there, which hopefully serve as a foundation for additional kind of analytical work that we can do that also can be used by leadership really at all levels of the organization. The first case study, and I know that this is probably way too detailed to be able to see on the screen, but I'll walk through it, is our Veterans Affairs Administration. They run a hospital network that serves our veterans across the country and have really excellent data both on their veterans patient satisfaction rates, but also their employee satisfaction and employee engagement rates. So what we did is try to map all of that together in this visual tool. And basically, if you are a full solid green on this, that means both your employees and your veterans you're serving are very satisfied. If you are an empty red circle, that means that both the employee and the veterans are not satisfied with the environment that they're in. And so you can kind of see the different gradations here, whether the color representing the satisfaction of the veteran and how filled in the circle is representing the engagement levels of the employee. So it provides, I often want to say a one version of the truth that both those people in those hospitals as well as the very senior leadership can all look at and have an understanding of where the challenges are. One of the things that really jumped out at us when we did this analysis is the geographic differences of this data. You see that in the southern part of the United States, we are much more red than in the northern part of the United States, which definitely raises equity and other questions that are worth investigating. We did also look at the correlation here and could show that by increasing employee engagement, 10 points increases patient trust on average by 3%, as well as the overall hospital rating by 4. So these are correlated with each other. The second case study is airports. Many of you may have flown to the United States through a TSA airport yourselves, and that is another agency we partnered with to do the same kind of analysis, looking at the satisfaction of air travelers with our TSA agents. And as you can see, the size of the circle also kind of shows the number of people traveling through these airports, but again begins to kind of help us dive in and understand some, for instance, very large airports who are doing very well, and what are they doing, and how can we take those practices and spread them to others as well. Similarly, we did a look and showed that increasing employee engagement by 10 points can decrease customer complaints by an average of 12%. So again, these are statistically correlated and really help give us a good framework for engaging in this efforts. There are a number of resources that we do have available. I mentioned earlier the performance.gov/CX page is a great place to start. We have a lot of tools and templates, and we do publish the customer journeys that we identify on that site as well. And it also serves as a bit of an accountability function for us to make sure we're monitoring our agency's performance and reporting on that regularly. We obviously have a number of guidance documents and things like that organized as well that we make available through that site. So with that, let me pause and would be really interested in any questions or reactions people have.
Yeah, thank you very, very much for that, Dustin, for joining us. Really a fascinating presentation. It's great to get a perspective kind of from outside Ireland as well in this arena too. So we're very, very grateful. I picked up a few pieces anyway, and it's really interesting here that the US particularly is working on life experiences, even though you're probably a little bit ahead of us in that domain anyway, but no doubt we will catch up. I know that particularly in response to the recent digital public services consultation we did, Marianne and the team will be focused on this area on the establishment of the life events portal, particularly with colleagues from across the public service. Another thing particularly that struck was kind of the case studies presented and kind of looking at the relationship between the customer and the employee is really, really fascinating. Kind of particularly the figure you mentioned there was it 10%, have I got it right? I think I wrote it here, 10% increase of employee engagement can precipitate a 12% reduction in negative customer complaints. So it's really it's fascinating to see that direct link between the two and almost how important it is to kind of keep faith in democracy almost, that what we can do as customer service practitioners on the ground to keep that engine going. We've actually had some really, really interesting questions come in, and first of all, I'm happy to open up to the floor. Does anyone kind of with us today have any questions they'd like to ask Dustin? I'll always start there anyway. Anyone, any questions? Nope. We'll pivot to a slide. Anyway, we've had quite a few come in anyway. It's kind of the one that kind of jumped out to me there was kind of, Dustin, like your experience has been across how many kind of administrations anyway, and the previous US administration was polarizing. Kind of how do you rebuild trust kind of for those people who felt a little bit maybe alienated or disenfranchised during that time?
Well, I think that is a really important focus. One of the things that this administration did on day one was sign an executive order around looking at equity and really having that be a more concerted focus of the administration as a lens through which we look at all parts of government and society. And we do have a small team kind of really working with agencies to develop kind of equity action plans and steps they can be taking to really, look at those individuals most marginalized in our society who have been underrepresented, as well as underserved communities, and making sure that we're more inclusive. I think actually this is an area where there's a lot we can learn from Ireland and your citizen assemblies and other features that initiatives you've taken to really make sure we're bringing those voices to the table. And I think that's true both from the citizens we serve, but just as importantly from our own workforce. And, many times the answers do lie within your own organizations and the insights that your own employees can bring. But we don't always have great mechanisms to bring those voices into decision-making rooms or integrated in to policy development, for instance. So that is definitely an area that I think we needed to be very intentional about at the beginning of this administration, to acknowledge that and make sure we created new mechanisms and routines to really make sure that those voices were brought in to help guide us at the beginning of the administration. I think we've begun to do that. I think we have a long way to go still.
No doubt. I mean, it's an iterative kind of process anyway, trying to improve how we work. Another question we have, kind of particularly in the area of kind of life events, and kind of that's the kind of area we're going into, and you discussed that quite very well earlier on. And kind of so we're kind of moving from silos to kind of working together to be able to deliver a more kind of seamless kind of approach to service delivery. How do agencies kind of in the US have they responded to kind of sharing info? Because I'd imagine that's quite a big process that's a big component of this process. So how have they responded to having to share information to kind of improve service delivery?
We're moving to that phase of the process. We haven't really gotten to some of the tougher decision points where I think those issues will become front and center in terms of our ability to make progress. We're still kind of at the phase of scoping the individual projects, but I'm cautiously optimistic that if we can do it legally without additional support from our friends in Congress, we'll have the leadership support to make it happen. So that's really been key. We're engaging our, as I said, the President's Management Council, which is our deputy ministers who meet every month, and my boss chairs that group. And we bring this issue of life experiences into every single one of those meetings. And it is, I think, one of the most important priorities for that group. So I'm optimistic that we can get leadership engaged, which, in my experience is a pretty effective way at breaking through maybe some of the traditional impediments to things like data sharing. I will say one area that we have worked on over, again, the last 3 administrations that I think is actually a decent example of a life experience project is working to reform our infrastructure permitting process. This is, if you build a renewable energy project, solar, wind, or dams, bridges, roads even, that are very complex, you have to go to 30 different individual agencies as a project proponent. And we've created a central team that really is working to make that kind of almost like a one-stop shop process where you have one lead agency that does the coordination. So we don't put the complexity of government onto those projects. And this is going to be absolutely critical if we're going to meet our climate goals, is making that process work better for renewable energy projects. So we have invested, we started a small investment in a central team of about $2 million. We had maybe 5 or 6 people. Congress came along and added an additional $10 million. So that team grew to about 20 people. And then we just, in the most recent Inflation Reduction Act, that little tiny agency that we started from my team is now got $350 million to really work to modernize this permitting process. So it's a good example of, I think, if you focus on the outcome, you start up building a team who can be dedicated to it and really work day in and day out to resolve some of the interagency challenges or barriers. People can gravitate to that and even be in a position to provide some resources to strengthen it even further.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I think it'll certainly strike a chord in trying to remove the complexity, as you said, of kind of government regulations, so that we can streamline processes for our end user, which is the most important thing. It should be the central ethos of kind of anyone working in customer service, especially. Look, I'm conscious of the time we've taken from you already. Dustin, we are very, very appreciative of your time. Really, really appreciate your insights. And God knows what time it actually is over there for you now that you can actually start your day having started with us. So, Dustin, thank you very much for your time. Could everybody give Dustin a round of applause? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy the day.
Okay, folks, we are going to move swiftly on to our second segment of the day, empowering our teams through learning and development. We are going to be welcoming Emer, Darcy and Richard Kelly to the stage in a moment. So we're going to be joined by Emer and Richard from the Court Service of Ireland. Emer is lead at the Family Law Reform Unit in the Court Service, and Richard works in the L&D team. So together, they're going to discuss how the Court Service leverages L&D initiatives to engage and empower their own staff to improve and deliver quality customer service. So they're going to focus on the particularly interesting, very, very interesting actually, is the trauma-informed practice training. And the programme was developed as a bottom-up approach and has been made available to staff all across the Court Service, which is fantastic and what we like to hear. But as we're going to hear as well, they're going to discuss the transformative aspect and impact the initiative has had on particularly how the Court Service delivers their quality customer service. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome up Emer first, or Richard as well. Perfect.
I can barely see you with the podium. Just as well I have my heels on as usual. Good afternoon, it's lovely to be here. My name is Emer Darcy. I'm leading the Family Law Reform Programme of the Court Service Modernisation Programme. And Richard Kelly, my colleague, works in Learning and Development. I know, yeah. Not working.
Yeah, I think you're just working on that. 1 second, folks.
That's okay. Anyway. So what we're just going to bring you through today is we're just going to give you a little bit of context in relation to the Court Service Modernisation Programme. And then we're going to bring you through the approach that we took in relation to developing trauma-informed training, how we did it, how we involved the staff. And then we'll speak to you about some of the outcomes that we're seeing and our next steps in terms of the journeys that we're going to take. We've given a little bit of detail in relation to the journey for the court service. We made the decision to become a trauma-informed organisation. So rather than just being single parts of the organisation will become trauma-informed, the entire organisation, we made the decision for the entire organisation to become trauma-informed. So we'll just bring you through that and hopefully there'll be some information. But we've left the detail so that if any of you want to become a trauma-informed organisation, there's a plan. Reduce, reuse, recycle, all of that kind of stuff. So the court service strategy, we have a 10-year vision bringing us out to 2030, a modernisation programme. Sorry, when I turn around the sound goes. The reform teams were created in 2021, but there was a lot of planning done during 2020. We're delivering lots of small pieces of progressive change as we go through things. We are using a service design approach. We are using a user-centric approach. And just to kind of explain those really briefly, because I know Julianne is going to speak later about service design, so I won't give you too much information on that. So a user-centric approach is, I suppose, for the court service, traditionally what happens is a piece of legislation goes through the Dáil, and then people ring us and go, do you know that was passed 3 weeks ago? And we go, really? Was it? Thanks. And then we struggle to figure out, what does the legislation mean? What changes do we need to our systems? What's going to happen when we open the doors tomorrow? What information are people going to need? And only then do we think about the staff or do we think about the users? So that's the traditional way of responding. What we're trying to do with this approach is to invert that. So what we do is we look at our stakeholder need. We understand it, we talk to people about it. And it's really important, I think, as part of this network, is our stakeholders are also our staff. They are the people who are delivering the service. So there's very close interaction between the people who are receiving and delivering the service. So it's really important to remember that user-centric is not just the person receiving the service, it's not just the customer. And at various stages, that can be a really helpful reminder in terms of who your audience is for a particular piece of work. And I suppose, as you'll see, developing the trauma-informed programme, it was our staff who were the key stakeholder in developing the training with them so that we could deliver better services. So in relation to service design, as I said, I won't go through it. We've used a service design approach throughout our modernisation programme, and it's also a process that we used in terms of developing the trauma-informed training. In the reform programmes, we also set design principles for the various pieces of work that we do. And the great news for all of you, as Marianne mentioned, is that you just go onto ops.gov.ie and you'll find the design principles that you can lift and use. They're ready to go. You don't even have to think about them. So I'm going to hand over to Richard, and he's just going to talk to you about the process that we took in relation to developing the training.
Thank you, Emer. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Richard Kelly from the Learning and Development. So, as Emer said, the first, I suppose, iteration we got of this was a staff suggestion from the front line, and that of us was Nina. And the office manager approached us to say that this looked like a very worthwhile project for us to get involved in. Little did we know the impact that such a small team was going to have on the organisation. So from that staff suggestion, we had to talk to the suppliers of this training, which is Quality Matters, who were very collaborative in their approach with us. They understood where we were coming from. So using the customer-centric approach, or the customer-centric approach was actually critical, because with it being from the staff-led, it was important that them as the major stakeholders dealing with people on the front line, they knew exactly what was happening on the front line. And that was echoed through L&D. Both myself and Simon, who are heavily involved in this, have over 20 odd years of experience. I won't say how much we actually have, but it's in around that. So we knew there was a lot of merit in this. So the idea was to go to pilot, and then bring it back then with the feedback, and then move to some iteration and a rollout across the organisation. I can't impress me how important it is, because this small thing was going to echo through the whole organisation. And if you think about it, what our customers need is based on what we can deliver as outcomes. So if the outcomes are about good for the court service, they're going to be good then for the court users. So next, so the staff suggestion, we went to Adapt in Limerick, who were a community-based organisation. Myself and Simon and Deirdre went down and took the training on the day. Now, it was described as empathy training. It was a lot deeper than that, and we knew, like I said, the ripples that this through the whole organisation could actually be huge. So we went to the family law work stream and we got their backing, and they said, yeah, that's probably a good way to go. So we explored what we need to do. So the conversations about L&D were about how we can actually use this in its present format. Now, obviously, it wasn't usable because it was more directed towards social services. So we said, no, we're going to have to maybe work it in a different way to make it more applicable to the court service. So we took the training in Limerick, noticed that the potential was going to be huge. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to approach quality matters, see what we could do with the training to make it more applicable to the court service, particularly with the proof of concept stroke pilot, and then see where we could go from that across the rest of the organisation. So we need to say that it can't be just for the court service around domestic violence. That would just pigeonhole it into a particular area. It had to go into the whole area around policy and what we did as an organisation going forward, whether that's in buildings and everything we're doing. So it tied very neatly with the modernisation programme. So more exploration was required to see what could actually be achieved. So the focus groups are set up. So the focus group was a mix of offices, and we were very deliberate in that we didn't just go to the obvious ones, which was the front line. We wanted to go to support, we wanted to go to the finance areas just to see how it could be used. Because again, tied with the modernisation programme, an awful lot going on just outside the operational areas. So it was vital that it fed into our policy. So the feedback was provided in tailoring the content to suit the court service. So some of the video content that was in there wasn't applicable to the court service. So we were conscious of that. That was one of the negative feedbacks from the initial course that people took. So we said, right, we can certainly have a look at that. So it's important to listen to what the frontline staff are telling you, and it's important to go on your own knowledge as well. You can't just ignore that, okay? So we identified the gaps in terms of the self-care content for the staff. Now, this is critical. When you're talking about the word trauma, you're talking about other people's trauma, and you're talking about triggers that trigger your own trauma. So there's a good conversation to be had there, and a very honest conversation with yourself, that you could have your own triggers in dealing with somebody, and you have to recognise that. And you have to recognise the triggers in others. I'm not going to go into trauma. As Emer said, go and take the course and you'll find out about it. So the decision was made to proceed with the pilot. It consisted of testing the new adaptive content for the court service. This is how we got on. So we structured it over 30 people, because many cynical people in as we possibly could, and that was quite deliberate as well, because we have a particular age group and cohort in the court service, and I have to say that we took them from the various areas, again, quite deliberate, because this has to work for the whole organisation, and we saw the potential for the whole organisation. So everything from IT developers, staff, support functions, frontline staff, project managers, the transformation partners. So I had to be very honest and very critical with the feedback. The training came with a health warning about the honesty, about yourself, and it's about the self-care thing. You have to be aware of yourself. And I think in public service, that's critical, and I don't think we actually do enough of that. You've got to be aware of other people and yourself. If you're aware of yourself, you can be aware of what others are going through. So we changed the title from trauma-informed care to trauma-informed practice, because the feedback coming from some of the staff was saying it seems to be more social care work, and that's not really our area of work. So that was a genuine issue for us. So we looked at that and we changed it to care, because we didn't want it to be that you're trying to fix people. You're not. You're just trying to give them better outcomes and behave in a better way towards them. That's basically what this is all about. So the results were overwhelmingly positive. 100% of those that took the pilot said that they would certainly recommend it to any of their colleagues. Suggestions were made in relation to the change of content to make it more suitable. And this is what we heard from the staff. It's a life skill. They wish they knew this earlier. Valuable for all roles. Now, just on the personal level, I've worked in some critical areas in the court service over the years, between the childcare court and the family law office. If I had this training when I was in those, I would have had different outcomes for myself personally and for the people I was working with. So I think it's actually, this training is vital for all public service, and I'd highly recommend it. Okay, so the changes following the feedback. We changed the questions raised in the pilot question. So we've done a new introduction piece, and that was to set the tone. So we've got the CEO, Angela Denning, and Audrey Leonard, who was the head of our Change Programme Office. And they set the tone for the court service as to why people should actually do the training. So that was good. The new introductory videos were filmed to provide context. So we've done a counter piece and we've done an interview piece, which most people in the court service would be familiar with. And it doesn't have to be family law, and it doesn't have to be. So they were quite generic in the approach. One of them was a domestic violence interview. So we developed a new manual. Dr. Sharon Lambert, who was one of the authors of the whole programme, so we done a specific Q&A. And the point of the Q&A was to drive home that it is usable within the court service. The way the other Q&A was done wasn't really relevant. So we said, no, it's important to get this right. So between the topping and tailing of the course, so you had the introduction piece, the 2 video pieces, and then the last Q&A was all completely court service relevant. So that really got us over the line then with the staff. So the generic videos, as I said, were actually replaced. So we see the role. The decision was made to adapt the training and deliver to all staff to become a trauma-informed organisation. The valuation of the pilot report was accepted by the SMT. A recommendation levels meant that there was no need for training to be mandatory just yet. We hope to get to mandatory. We think it's important that it should be mandatory. That's just a personal opinion. Clear benefit of trauma-informed approach was there. So what you have to understand is we're in the middle of COVID. So the first interaction we had with Limerick was just as COVID was kicking off. So all of a sudden now we're online. So the whole course was delivered online, okay, in a blended approach. So people are given 3 hours pre-course work to do, and then you're doing 2 online workshops. For us, it was the first blended course that the court service ever did, and it's also our most popular. So it changed not only the way we deliver, it changed the way people want to interact when they are learning with L&D. It's been overwhelming. It's been a success. So it's opened more doors for us around the area of blended learning. So 3 hours, and then your online workshop, you go into it through what's called our learning management system. We're unique in the public service. I think we're the only ones to have it, their own internal learning management system. So we're quite lucky that way. The course information, dates and information was released in small batches, advertised using fortnightly staff newsletter. There's been no sort of PR around this, no huge drive to get people interested in it. So apart from emails going out occasionally and word of mouth, it's been really, really popular. So like I said, it's been fed up, and it's been fed across through the grassroots as well. So people know it means something, and they can see the difference it's going to make. So therefore, they're pushing to look for it. We're not pushing it out. They're pushing us for more courses on it. So the uptake, 300 people have completed it by the end of this year. So between the start, it's been roughly about 18 months altogether between start to finish. We're starting to see changes in our practice and behaviour. So we conduct evaluations regularly. So the first 3 months highlight staff applying the learning and changing practices at work. High levels of engagement, and the recommendations are 91% that you would recommend it to a colleague. There's increased awareness across the whole organisation, and they understand what people's triggers are now in relation to how services are actually being delivered. It could be waiting around, it could be being interviewed in small areas, in small confined spaces, stuff like that, how we design our buildings, how we design our processes. So the practical exam was family law and civil work streams are providing information to court users, written to meet plain English standard, but also with a trauma lens. And the trauma lens, if that's being used by all areas within the court service, across all the different services and how they interact with each other, if we're all looking through that same lens, we're going to get better outcomes both for the staff and for our users. It's plain and simple. That is just the reality of it. Building design is being considered from a trauma-informed perspective, Hammond Lane, and in general across the whole courts buildings. The interview around practice to reduce trauma, don't ask an applicant to tell their story. Let them tell it in their own time. Don't be just rushing through the form for the sake of getting it out. and getting them done. The point is concentrating on the best outcome for them. I've had situations in the past where doing an interview, busy day, you just want to get through the numbers. But unfortunately, people might panic and leave. So that person's gone without what they actually came in for, which is their order, which is the court, which is the protection of the court. And we need to understand that a little bit more. So this is a video. So this is the impact that the training has had on people, and I hope it works.
Completing the trauma-informed practice for me as a manager reminded me of the need to take into account the stress and anxiety that people are feeling when they come into contact with any worker in a court office. I found when the staff completed the course, it resulted in much better outcomes for them and the people that they were dealing with, because even the reminder of the 3 words trauma-informed practice when they went to deal with a member of the public, especially when they were busy in a highly charged environment, which a court venue is, that it just reminded them to take into account that it was really important to deal with these people in an empathetic way. I can't overestimate the benefit of attending this course.
The trauma-informed practice training has been hugely beneficial to the team here at Farmleigh House. It has been of great help in processing domestic violence applications, as it has broadened our awareness of the effects trauma can have on people and the various different triggers that there are. Efforts are being made by all to provide more considered service to our core users, implementing better ways to help our customers feel more at ease. I recommend this course to all colleagues in order to work more effectively, as I feel it has aided me in both my professional and my personal life.
Hi everyone, my name is Patrick Kirk. I work for Deloitte and I've been supporting the court service as a business analyst for the last 14 months on the Family Law Reform workstream. Trauma-informed training has helped me because it's given me a different perspective, particularly when supporting the development of user-centric services. My one key takeaway is that there is no one-size-fits-all, and awareness is key when it comes to being trauma-informed.
I completed the trauma-informed practice training course in January of this year, and I found it to be very helpful. Having started my career in the court service in a court office, it allowed me to reflect on some of the situations which I experienced there. In my current role, even though it's more administrative support, I've still found it to be beneficial in helping me deal with difficult conversations with members of the public over the phone.
So we just wanted you to hear directly from some of our staff about how they have found the training. Just a couple of things that have been said to us. Initially, as Richard mentioned, people weren't sure whether IT should attend this course or finance. What was the benefit going to be? But our SMT decided, let's go with the pilot project, and we will ask a small number of people from those areas to attend the course and give feedback. In IT, they now recommend to all of their new colleagues starting that they do the training. One of the developers said, I always thought I was designing a system, but I'm designing for individuals. So that's changing the perspective of our IT unit in terms of development work that's going on underway. Our colleagues are recommending to their colleagues that they do the training because they see the benefit, both for themselves personally, but also in terms of how they're delivering service. We work in a difficult environment. We deal with, if it's broken in society, it comes to the court service. So it's really helping people to deal with that situation, both on a personal level, as I said, as well in relation to service levels. Recently, one of our colleagues told us that he's been engaging with a member of the public through the reform programmes, and that person said that they had noticed a big change in one of the offices that they engage with. They said that they were just being treated in a much more patient and kind manner, and we discovered that the entire office has completed the trauma-informed training. So we don't have numbers, we don't have employee engagement maps and graphs and stuff like that, but everybody in the organisation is now starting the conversation. And what's really important, I think, for people to maybe take away in relation to this is that this came from our users. Our staff said, hello, this would be great, could we please have this help? And the organisation worked with them to help them design what they needed to solve their problems so that they could deliver better service. And as Richard said, we don't have a big communications campaign. There are communications, but it's very low key. There isn't a big push, there's no forcing people. People are choosing for this to be their way of working. There's our plan that I mentioned. That'll be on the slides. You can copy and paste all you like. And like I said, we've made the decision to become a trauma-informed organisation. It is not an overnight process. We're nearly at the end of year 2. We've 2 more years to go, and we're getting there. But it's great, as Richard said, in relation to, for example, some of the information that we're writing online. From an e-commerce perspective, you want people to have as few clicks as possible on a website. Through a trauma lens, people need much smaller pieces of information. They need time to consider it. They need to know what their next step is. So our new family law information has smaller pieces, and you go away and you think about it, because that's part of the process. And then you can come back and click. So it's a slightly different interaction, and that is paying attention to the trauma lens. So where are we? Well, we're on our journey. An implementation plan is underway. We are looking at how the data and the metrics of the training can be developed further. Any barriers that are coming up in relation to engagement, they're being addressed as we go. They have been, some of the usual cultural barriers that people approach, but a service design mechanism is allowing us to overcome that. And we're continuing to get feedback from people. So I think it's 3 months after people do the training, there's a check-in to see how they're doing. And there's very, very strong evidence that people are actually applying what they're learning and they're still finding it valuable. So we're happy to take any questions. Oh, we're sitting down for questions.
Come join. Thank you very much, both of you. I think working as part of this team over the course of the past 18 months, it's really genuinely has struck me how progressive the court service are in this domain, really holistically engaging with their end users. And it's really, what I've really picked up and really resonated with me there is what you were saying, Richard, earlier about how the user is not just the people we offer the service to, it's also the one who's doing the offering. And I think that's really, really important thing as we go forward, even into the kind of the next iteration of transformation, that we also remember the person who's offering the service to. Genuinely, it's wonderful to see that self-awareness and empathy has to start from within as well before we go outwards. It's wonderful to see. We've generally had a lot of questions in about this, kind of even thinking in terms of an administrative point of view, and that's obviously very, very important too. We have a question in, has the trauma approach resulted in any significant process or administrative changes within the court service?
Well, we're in the process of making these changes, and it's informing all of the conversations that we do. It's informing our planning. We're at early doors of a 10-year programme, but what we are noticing is that staff are choosing to make proactive, positive changes to how they deliver their service. And it's not an instruction. It's not something that's being forced upon them. They are choosing to look at how they deliver service, how they respond to people, how they speak to people, and also in their colleagues. We're noticing actually at the end, if there might have been a tense meeting, there's people going, did I see potential trauma behaviours there? Because that might explain that particular trigger. So the conversation is starting and it's having an impact in relation to that. But it hasn't changed things yet because we're at the start of that. But as I said, people are choosing to look at things differently, which I think is a fantastic outcome.
Yeah, look, even what you were saying there, even just about the meeting, like we had a question in there asking about, do you believe that this approach will be valid for public service working across the entire spectrum? Yeah. And even looking at the video, you can look at their job titles and it's like finance, say another colleague working in Dolphin House, like they won't have the same roles, but they both benefited. Yeah. So would you speak a little bit too about how you you believe that it would also be applicable to other public servants outside courts?
I mean, anybody's got any sort of feeling at all would say, you have to look at the end user and say, what is the end user? It doesn't matter where I'm on, you're still a human at the end of the day, and we're providing a human-to-human service at the end of the day, whether you're designing a website or whatever it happens to be. So if you're doing it through that lens, all public services should be doing it, because it's definitely a gain there. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's great for just raising, it's just about an awareness. We're not, our role, and probably the role of many people here, your role is not to solve the problem that the person has. Your role is to deliver the service that they need at that point in time. So it's a much more light touch example. But as Richard said, we are people delivering services to people. So by understanding people, we can do that a little bit easier. So I would say absolutely knock yourselves out and go for it.
No, you're like it's so like even when you said earlier, I don't really realise that that's even a momentous thing that you said. It was like we had a call from someone working in a particular office and called us with an idea.
Yeah.
And you went with it. I think like so many organisations could benefit from having that kind of culture where there is someone that I can go to and I can pick up a phone call and they'll take my idea seriously because of my experience on the ground and you'll run with it. It's fantastic. And I think even mentioned you might want to could you speak a little bit more about how you said you check in with colleagues periodically to kind of what's their approach, and is that kind of a thing that you take that feedback and change, or how do you go? What do you do with it?
Well, L&D, you're looking for change in behaviour. That's ultimately the goal of sending anybody in a course. But obviously, in relation to where the modernisation is, you're always looking for that piece of the continuous improvement. So we check in after the course has been delivered, and then 3 months later. Part of the plan will be, in some way, maybe to separate out. Separate the course out to people who are coming in, say, to get a smaller version of induction, to get that intro piece, and then you get the whole course then within the 4 6 months of arrival. And then what you do is then, but as you see that from the plan, we're trying to build in champions, and it's not really delivering a course, it's delivering an ethos. Well, not just the course is done and it's delivered, it's not. It's about changing how we go about everything in the course service.
That's incredible, genuinely. I think also kind of, again, you're talking about kind of culture change, and I think the area is also important about how this culture directly impacts end users. So is there a way that you kind of foresee how you would kind of measure the impact of this work on the end user? Is that kind of part of your working ethos as you go through this change?
Year 3, yeah. Well, obviously we have no baseline, but it being new, it is going to take time to get proper metrics. But one of the ideas you have obviously is the secret shoppers, but like we're going to have a situation where hopefully anybody who we're dealing with can see there is an actual change here, because we deal with an awful lot of stakeholders. So there's a lot of measurement to be done. It hasn't been done yet, I'll be quite honest yet, but we are looking at that. So we are planning for that, yes. Absolutely.
And our employee engagement, we're changing our approach in relation to employee engagement, so we're following the Healthy Places to Work approach. So that first survey is happening this year, so that'll be creating our baseline, and it'll be, as I said, it's not something you just roll out overnight and it's done. It'll build over time. Yeah,
I think that was kind of a significant kind of point raised over and over again, is how you're engaging with them. And you're right, that has to go back and forward before you can decide this is how we're kind of going to gauge. And even when you're saying kind of you're working with stakeholders, we had a question in kind of asking about kind of courts sat in the justice domain, and kind of has this kind of, is this been existed kind of uniquely within courts, or have you kind of moved out to like probation service or anything like that, or maybe it's part of early discussions?
We're like, as part of the modernisation programme, we're expanding the traditional group of stakeholders we would speak to. So traditionally it's very much within the justice sector, and we all are in our lovely legal bubble, and we don't really, we weren't paying attention to everybody else. But we have broadened that out. But there's other organisations who are working with us, and we have basically said, look, if you want to send somebody on this, send them to the course. Let them see how it is, let them take it away. We've had colleagues from the Department of Justice, from IT. We've had people from the Civil Service Employee Assistance Service and different organisations. You saw Patrick from Deloitte, they're our transformation partner. They are now also having they have this conversation with their colleagues about this, and they explain what a trauma lens is and how it just gives a different perspective. So we have offered it out. If there's space on a course and people want to go and try it out, come and try it out.
We've had people from the Department of Education, Ombudsman, Children's Ombudsman, Guards Ombudsman, and the Guards themselves have actually come in as well.
No doubt. Again, it's
we're starting to refuse people now.
That's a good thing. I might have a preconceived notion as to who might benefit from this kind of initiative but then obviously even from hearing from you guys, you're right that every person does encounter trauma, and we just encounter it in different ways, and we just need to understand that before we engage with people, and no doubt that it will have tangible, measurable impacts on the people that we serve. Just want to make sure, does anyone else in the audience have any questions before we wrap up with Emer and Richard? Yeah, fantastic. We have a question over here in the corner. Jade, or we'll get a roving mic to you now, no problem. Welcome along. If you just wouldn't mind introducing yourself when we get it to you.
Hi, my name is Marianne. I work with the Citizens Information Board. So it's not so much a question, actually, it's more just a comment, and I suppose a word of congratulations. I have no real experience with the court service, I'm pleased to say, but I was recently called to for jury service, and so I attended in Cork Circuit Court. And I suppose as someone who was just randomly selected from the electoral register to come up on a certain date and a certain time in this appointed place, I suppose I'd just like to say that listening to you today, actually, I had a very, like the case itself wasn't a very nice case, but the actual experience of being a juror was actually very positive in the sense that everyone I met was very polite, very pleasant. People were constantly checking, did we have enough tea and coffee and biscuits in the room? The process of what we were expected to do and the requirements were very clearly explained throughout in a very, very easy to follow, understandable, means. So I suppose just I can now, now that you've described the trauma training, I can see actually how it actually, as someone attending in court, it impacted. So just to say well done on that. And just as a question, I suppose I've worked in training myself over the years, and sometimes the softer skills training, like trauma-informed training, I'm going to teach you how to be more empathetic. I am empathetic. I'm really empathetic. I don't even know how to. Like, was there, your staff seem to have been very positive. Was it just you picked, I know you said at one point you got a steering group of quite cynical people, which are always the best to bring into a room. Was there a hard sell, or?
I think that's why the service design approach has probably served us very well in relation to this. People, initially, we had some conversations where people were going, no, it's fine, that's for social workers in Tusla. That's nothing to do with us. But we used our modernisation programme as a hook. We used the service design mechanism to communicate back and say, well, we're in the business now of evidence-based decision making, so you haven't been on the course. So how about you come on the course and then you can tell us what it is or it is not, or you can nominate somebody to go on the course and give you that feedback. So and with the pilot, like we did say to people, we want you to come in here and rip this apart, because we need to be able to give that messaging out there, and to be able, it's a very, very strong message, to go back up to the senior management team and say, these people tried so hard to destroy this, but 100% of them want to recommend it. And when a third of the organisation has chosen to do the course, and 91% of them say they would recommend it to a colleague, that's a very strong message. And now our senior managers are starting to go, I better get myself on that course, because they're hearing the language that their own colleagues are speaking. They're seeing perhaps differences. They're small. It's small differences in behaviour. It's just awareness stuff. So this is one, people will always say you can't progress this at all unless all your senior management team are first in the door and leading the charge. This charge has been led by staff, but because of our service design approach, it has been to solve a problem for them and with them. And we've been able to push that up through the organisation rather than waiting for a big launch by senior managers. So, if you come across your obstacles, just go around them.
Just to echo, just to finish that point, one of the best examples of feedback we got was that the actual thing was, this is the most practical course I've ever been on. Yeah. And people saw the practical example for themselves and for the users, and that connection between the two of them. And that was something that we hadn't seen before. So that's another reason why, and of course then, the word of mouth is very important.
And as Sarah said in the video, the overwhelming feedback as well is that people have said, this is a life skill. This isn't about being a public servant. This isn't just about my job. I'm gaining on a personal level from this. And almost everybody has said, could have done with this training 10, 20, 30 years ago. But it's just an awareness. That's all it is.
It's extraordinary, and it's simple too, in many respects too. Look, thank you so much, both of you, for your time, Richard and Emer. Look, a bottom-up approach and an ethos of empathy, I think, is definitely the way to go about it. Can we have a round of applause for Emer and Richard? No, I'll say that in a second. Okay, folks. So, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We're going to take a quick break now for about 20 minutes, so that should lead us up to about 20 past. over the course of the next, there is, if you want to go out to Conservatory, for those of you joining us today, there's tea, coffee, kind of take a little brief reprieve, but also we will be launching a poll on Slido to gauge your feedback. It will remain open, so please do just take a moment to answer the questions and we get your feedback. We'll see you in 20. Thank you very much.